Hello and welcome, lads and lasses, to a mech tech lore video. On today's topic, we will be discussing Lostech equipment. Now, Lostech is essentially the technology that was created during the Star League era, the most advanced nation-state to have ever dwelled within the sphere, uniting the scattered dynastic kingdoms in space to form their own interstellar empire. Before collapsing from internal strife, the technological advancements that were made in this era would be lost in the major succession wars to follow their collapse after the Ameris Civil War. And with the exodus of the SLDF from the sphere under the stewardship of Alexander Kerensky, protector of the realm, many of these technologies would remain lost, only to be rediscovered hundreds of years later in the dawn of the 31st century, with the uncovery of the Helm memory core. Now, for today's lore video, we will be going over a series of Lostech equipment. To begin with, we will discuss the AMS, or Anti-Missile System. The AMS is designed to function as a mech's close-point defense against missile or rocket-based munitions. Now, that sounds pretty handy, but on the flip side, it has a relatively short range. Pilots who had outfitted their battle mechs with it in the Star League era also often reported the ammo bins drying up too quickly in engagements. This led to the pilots choosing when to activate their AMS, turning it off if the enemy missile spread could be lessened by cover to preserve as much of their precious DACA as possible. Now, when using the AMS, it is important to know that the relatively low ammunition capacity greatly reduces its use in long-term engagements. So, when activating your AMS, you want to take into consideration when it is crucial and when it is not. For example, if you can easily duck behind cover of a building, a canyon cliff face, or perhaps a friend, use as a human shield. Trust me, they'll absorb rockets just as well as a building. Presumably your friend is, of course, larger than you. Unless your friend is a cute Herbie-chan, then of course they'll still absorb a quarter of the damage, and hey, a quarter is a quarter. You should definitely do so to preserve as much munitions as possible. Also, while your AMS is active, you are not invincible. While the AMS blasts missiles out of the sky, it cannot stop them all. Mechs, even outfitted with the AMS components, will find that if they are targeted by multiple LRMs, long-range missiles, or SRMs, short-range missiles, equipped enemies, that their defense system will be near null and void. Let's put this into perspective, shall we? So let us say that you are in your Highlander, and you think that just because you have all that nice thick armor, in addition to a shoulder-mounted AMS turret to obliterate those pesky rocket-propelled sadness packages from the sky, that you'd be safe from any significant amount of damage. That's where you're wrong, kiddo. The AMS can reduce a volley of missile fire for a time. However, if faced with, let's say, catapult or multiple LRM and SRM combatants, you'll find the incoming simultaneous missile barrages to be the equivalent of trying to use a tennis racket to bat away at a Flammenwerfer. You'll find that you'll be quite werft in Flammen. The AMS is not an all-in-one answer to missiles. Rather, it is a tool to reduce incoming damage when possible, not outright prevent it. Think carefully of when best to use it, warrior. Also, if you're wondering, no, it cannot be used offensively against anything but missiles in-game. Though it would be awesome if this bad boy could blast power armor out of the sky. Though the AMS can be equipped on any vehicle, so it has a wide range of applications from battle mech to battle tank, etc., etc. Now, for game rules, please note that anytime I begin to talk about the rule sets, I'm going to directly quote the readouts as listed. This is to prevent any confusion that may occur when I do these lower videos. Reference is in the description. The link listed here will direct you to where you may purchase a digital PDF version of the readout. Game use. Whenever a mech equipped with an anti-missile system is attacked by a flight of missiles, the player can choose to engage the system prior to the to-hit roll. The defending player simply rolls a 1d6 to determine how many missiles the system has destroyed. The player rolls another 1d6 and multiplies the results by 2 to determine how much anti-missile ammunition was spent shooting down the attacking missiles. Note that it is possible for the second die roll to result in more ammunition being expended than was available. In such a case, the results of the missiles destroyed roll still apply. The missiles then make their attack as normal. If any remain, but the player uses the column appropriate to their reduced number on the missile hit table. If the number of missiles falls between two columns, use the column closest to the number rounding down. For example, an LRM 10 flight that was reduced to 9 missiles would still use the 10 column, but if that flight was reduced to 8 missiles, it would use the 6 column. A flight reduced to 1 missile uses the second column. A flight cannot hit with more missiles than it has after the attack. Regardless of the result on the missile hit table, the anti-missile system can only be used against missiles. The anti-missile system table is 0.5 tonnage, 1 critical space, and 12 shots per ton. All in all, you'll find the AMS to be a very interesting component for certain situations. It is only useful if your enemy brings a substantial amount of missile-based weapons. It should activate only when needed to preserve its rather limited ammunition draw. If you can afford the extra tonnage on your battle mech or vehicles, you'll find that the AMS can keep your vehicles combat operational, but only for a while longer. Under heavy barrages, the AMS becomes quite useless as it's not capable of keeping up with the sheer quantity of missiles. The next piece of Lostech equipment we'll be discussing is the Arrow 4 missile system. For those of you violently shaking in your chair, calm down. It's one of those weapons that just sends shivers down your spine, I know. The Arrow 4 missile. Well, it's basically the Long Tom of the Battletech universe. It's a long-range surface-to-surface missile. She's meant to step in for standard artillery. Now, one of the added benefits of choosing to install the Arrow 4 missile system is that it's relatively lightweight compared to conventional artillery. One of the drawbacks has got to be the cost of munitions, as these missiles sure as hell ain't cheap. Now, there are two options of missiles you can use. There's the cheaper standard area saturation missile. The standard missile has a 45-meter blast radius and does general explosive damage to any unlucky SOB to be caught in the blast radius. The second and more expensive option is the Homing Arrow 4. It requires the use of the tag to be guided to its target in tandem with the missile's internal computer targeting system. This missile allows for more precise strikes as to minimize collateral damage for those of you warriors who still yet have honor. She's worth her weight in C-bills, all right, so long as you can guarantee the shot, or drop one of those standard ones right on a mechanized infantry column. That'll do a lot of damage. Now for the game rules. Game use. Arrow 4 missile artillery is treated just like any other artillery piece using all the off-board artillery rules found on pages 41 through 2 of the Battletech manual. One quick insert here. This book is old, so you might actually find it in some of the newer, more condensed versions of the rulebook, such as I think the Alpha Command Strike should be out relatively soon, or maybe one of the Total Warfare books. Continuing, unless otherwise noted below. If a standard area saturation missile is fired, the location of the target hex and the turn of arrival should be noted on paper. The area saturation missiles do 20 points of damage to all units in the impact hex, and 10 points to all units in the surrounding hexes. Homing missiles do not need to have a target hex plotted when fired, but the attacker must note which tag, which stands for Target Acquisition Gear, equipped unit he will use for designating during the turn of arrival. During the offboard artillery portion of the phase, on the turn of arrival, the attacking player must designate a target with the unit previously noted. If the unit does not designate a target, the missile will impact harmlessly into the ground. To designate a target, a tag-equipped unit must have a valid line of sight, or LOS, which you'll see in the rulebooks, to the target and be within 15 hexes. The base to hit number is found on the table below. All normal combat modifiers for attacks apply, including attacker's movement, target movement, partial cover, gunnery skill, and so on. If the target is designated, the missile strikes the target on a 2d6 roll of 4 or more. It will do 20 points of damage to the target and 5 points of normal artillery damage to any other unit in the hex. The damage location discovered as though the designating unit were firing at the target. Therefore, if the designating unit is in the left side of the arc of the target, Use the left side of the column of the hit location table to find out what portion of the mech was hit. If the attack misses, it does only 5 points of artillery damage to the target and to any other unit in the hex. Arrow 4 missile system table, heat 10, damage 20, minimum artillery, maximum range of 5, tonnage 15, critical 15, ammo 5. Heat is 0 below, but that's the homing. Damage not available, so you again, you'll have to reference that in another thing. It's short 1 to 5, tag is 6 to 9, long is 10 to 15, and tonnage is 1, critical is 1, and ammo is not available in this little piece of paper. Makes me sad, but that's what you're gonna have to use another book. This is one thing I need to insert and just stop this real quick here. It annoys me. It annoys me that you have to reference multiple books. There's unfortunately no other way to do it if you have the Arrow missile system, unless this is in one of the more newer, condensed rule books. So, yeah, it's one of those things where special weapons or rules like this, my suggestion to you is create a note, put it somewhere, and be like, okay, this is how this weapon works, and so you can reference it later. Or just, stick a sticky note in there with the pertinent information written on there. Anyways, moving on. All in all, the Arrow 4 missile system, if used correctly, can utterly demolish targets or groups of targets with well-placed shots. Again, if you're role-playing this weapon, you'll want to be very, very careful with it, as you might kill or damage something you might not necessarily would like to. Moving on to the next weapon, and I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are like, oh, you're going to say those weapons? Where's those weapons? Yes, they're coming. They're right here, guys. The clanner weapons. Okay, you can stop howling at the moon, you freaking savages. So, now we're going to be talking about the extended range laser and the PPC. Now, one thing before you guys screech at me too loudly, we will talk about them again when we move on to the clanner lore. But for now, I'm going to be kind of general with them because they're going to disappear, and for the most part of the period of time we're covering right now, they don't really exist anymore, except this book is 2750, so it's like they do exist, just not for very long. So, now let's dive right in, shall we? The ER Large Laser. It's a laser that is large and has quite the range, much like its name. Pretty much self-explanatory as to how it works. ER standing for, I'm sure you've guessed it by now, extended range. The ER large laser table for firing is as follows. 12 points of heat, 8 points of damage, weighing in at 5 tons and a critical of 2. As one would expect, she has 0 ammunition as it's an energy weapon. She'll be drinking your fusion core, and with that heat buildup, you'll find yourself getting toasty real quick. Her ranges are 1 to 7 hexes for short, 8 to 14 hexes for medium, and 15 to 19 hexes for long ranges. This one is one of my personal favorite lasers, as its bright lance will be able to burn targets at longer distances than your standard laser weaponry. She's a close number 2 to the pulse laser for me, but in-game usage, you'll find that this laser is great for melting armor at long distances. Take advantage of your ranges. It allows for some good kiting. However, on the flip side, watch that heat buildup. She burns hot, and you'll find your mechs glowing bright molten red real quick. In video game adaptations, you'll find the translation to be quite accurate to the tabletop as to functionality. If you can avoid it, don't bring this weapon to hot planets. It will hamstring a mech with insufficient heat sinks or coolant fluid, which on that note, be sure to bring as much coolant fluid as possible. And on lava worlds, remember, putting heat sinks on your feet, it's not going to work out particularly well, let's just say that much. Next up, we have the ER-PPC. That stands for Extended Range Particle Projector Cannon. Again, they do roughly the equivalent amount of damage as their predecessor variants. However, they are going to be racking up quite the heat. So let's get the rundown of the ER-PPC table. She's a smoking babe, all right. 15 points of heat. Oh, mama damn, that's a hot one. That's only 3 more points than the ER Large Laser. But you'll find that it stacks up extremely fast, so be very cautious. Again, watch your heat management. It is essential for these sorts of weapons. She punches into the enemy mechs, blowing scalding molten divots, utterly blasting her way through armor with a whopping 10 points of damage. Oh man, I love energy weapons sometimes. While you don't have to worry about the internal explosions from your ammo racks detonating or keeping tabs on ammo, you should be very conscious of heat management. Your internals will fry, and you will find that the heat pressure will act as sort of internal detonations of their own. Not to mention, your superstructure has weak knees for heat, and while racking that up will bring damage across the board, that can actually pop your fusion core, which will kill you. Heat can make your mech's limbs blow clear off to let all that heat energy displace. Also, this might be a good time to mention that your warriors are riding just above a fusion reactor, so unless you want your mech tech scraping charred mech warriors out of the cockpit for a week, watch those heat levels. The next weapon we have is a classic, the Gauss rifle. This one's one of my favorites for sure. The Gauss rifle is powered by a series of magnets. This is quite nice, as your ammunition is solid caseless slugs, meaning they have no need for explosive propellant, which sort of translates to your ammo racks can't detonate. At least not with the Gauss rounds anyways. Now, for the Gauss rifle's table, this monster cannon racks up 1 point of heat, 15 points of damage. That is awesome. This puppy will punch right through cockpits, utterly shredding interior systems, causing all sorts of mayhem with the enemy's cockpit, but I digress too much here. Her ranges are as follows. She has a minimum of 2 hexes, a short range of 1 to 7 hexes, 8 to 15 hexes for medium, 16 to 22, for long, and weighing in about 15 tons. She has a critical of 7 and an ammo setting of 10. So yes, not very much ammo in that department. In-game, she plays like a rifle, much like the name. High-powered one at that. However, you're going to want a stable firing position to make every shot count. Those slugs are massive. There is a reason why internal cockpit systems are rarer by the decade in the Battletech universe. You can blame these suckers right here. It is also said that these master cannons have slain many a space whale. Next up, we have ourselves the KW-1 Ultra Autocannon 5, masterfully designed by Kawabata Weapons Incorporated. This one actually has some special rules, so we're going to have to reference the book for this one. So, to begin, game use. Whenever the player fires the AC5 Ultra, he can choose to fire at normal or double rates of fire. If he selects normal rate of fire, all normal combat rules apply. If he chooses double rate of fire, use the rules given below. An AC5 Ultra firing at double rate generates twice as many heat points and uses 2 shots of ammunition instead of 1. The standard to hit roll is made. If the roll is successful, the player must roll in the 2 column of the missile hit table to determine how many shots hit. For each hit on the target, roll to discover the hit location. Each shot that hits does 5 points of damage. Additionally, whenever the weapon fires in its double fire mode, and the result of the to-hit roll is a 2, the arming circuitry fails and the weapon is useless until repaired by a tech. To make this repair, roll a 2d6 on a result of 3 or more, the weapon is completely repaired in a required time of 15 minutes per repair rules on table on page 92 of the Mech Warrior book, which, by the way, that book it's referencing is ancient. So, not sure where that one is. Honestly, quick little digression here before we delve into the tables. What they really need to do is reprint almost everything into a more condensed format. Because a lot of times when these older books that we're going to be going through and I reference other books, it's like they actually kind of rolled them into other things. And it's like, God damn it. Like, I don't even know where they are because there's so many books and pages. And honestly, I'm not that good with numbers and remembering mathematics. So, pardon. So, now let's delve into the Autocannon 5 Ultra table. For its heat, she does 1 point of heat, as discussed before, 5 points of damage, a minimum range of 2 hexes, short range of 1 to 6 hexes, medium 7 to 13 hexes, 14 to 20 for long, and a tonnage of 9. Critical 5 points, and an ammunition capacity of 20. The AC5 is gonna be better at longer ranges. If the enemy closes the gap, switch to your medium to close range weapon groupings as to conserve ammunition. The AC5 KW is something I've never actually used, but based on its stats and its readings, that's how I would use it. I wouldn't want to use that in too much close proximity, though, if desperate times, desperate measures, you know what they say. Let 'em have it. Alpha strike away. What's this, brothers? Another glorious weapon, you say? Ah, yes, the LB-10X autocannon. It's an AC-10, all right, but get this, it's made with lighter materials, which also allows for better heat displacement, and to top that off, will require fewer heat sinks in your loadout. Thanks to that, she's a bit on the pricier side, though, so you're gonna have to crack open that wallet. Because honestly, but it's honestly a pretty good upgrade, all things considered. So it's worth its weight in dollars, and you'll see in just a second. She's capable of firing standard anti-rounds, just like your standard AC-10. But let me ask you, have you ever wanted a mech shotgun? I'm going to assume a yes on that one, Chief. The LB-10XAC is capable of firing cluster munitions, which increases the chances of striking critical components quite drastically. This, however, reduces the overall damage output, so think carefully on that one, boys. Now, for the game rules. Game use. The players must specify at the start of the game which LB-10X ammo is cluster-type ammunition and which is normal ammunition. Honestly, I'd write that down on a note card or something. Best way to do it depends if you're using Tabletop Simulator. Moving on. LB-10X cluster rounds can only be designated in full ton slots. Lots, pardon. When firing the ammunition, the player marks off the appropriate type. So, check it off or subtract it if you've got some sort of way to keep tabs on it. Tokens, anything works really. Any attack made with the cluster round receives a -1 modifier to the to-hit number at all ranges. So this is pretty handy. Resolves hits by cluster rounds like a missile hit, with the player rolling on the 10 column of the missile hit table to determine how many of the submunitions actually strike the target. Make a separate hit location roll for each of the submunitions that strike. Each successful hit does 1 point of damage to the location struck. For the table, we'll have 2 points of heat, 10 points of damage, short 1 to 6 hexes, medium is 7 to 12 hexes. Long ranges is 13 to 18 hexes. Total tonnage is 11. A critical of 6. And ammo of 10. It is a very RNG-reliant weapon. However, it certainly is an interesting weapon to try, especially with the cluster-based munitions. All in all, though, the LBX-10 is just kind of better. So I just recommend getting it if you've got the excess money. Plus, it frees up some tonnage. And the various munition types to try, or the two, I should say, the new one being the cluster munitions, just offers an interesting sort of exploration into how a shotgun works on a mech. And that itself is kind of cool. The next piece of hardware we have is a very different one from what we're used to. It's the One-Shot Missile Pack, or OS for short. Much like in the name, it is capable of firing only a single volley of missiles, as it has no feeds to the ammo compartments, which means it's unable to restock its supply. Game use. Single-shot launchers weigh half a ton more than standard missile launchers, but the launcher incorporates a single shot or volley of missiles into that weight. The player does not need to purchase any other ammunition for the launcher. The launcher can be fired only once in a game. The one-shot missile packs will have limited usability in combat, and they're not particularly worth it too much in my opinion. But it's a very circumstantial weapon, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here. So if you can find a situation in which it works, definitely go for it. But for the most part, this is kind of a not really particularly necessary weapon. You're better off getting some of the other stuff that we're going to go into here as well. Can you guess? The pulse laser. Such an iconic weapon. But if you have a history of epilepsy like myself, Be slightly careful with this weapon in video game adaptations. I grew out of mine, but that might trigger that. That might actually trigger a seizure. So the idea behind the pulse lasers is that it cycles high energy pulses unlike its laser cousin, which generates heat. However, the pulse differs on generating more heat and having slightly shorter ranges, making it a more brawly laser, with an overall higher damage output as a trade-off, which makes it very interesting. Makes it good for brawly mechs, definitely. For the game use, pulse lasers are used in the same manner as normal weapons, but an automatic -2 applies to the base to hit number. When playing battle troops, the small pulse laser can function as an automatic weapon. So, like little tiny machine gun, you know, like flickering lights. Bunch of people having epilepsy everywhere. Oh God, it's autistic. It's beautiful. All right. So, for the pulse laser table, we're gonna start off with the small pulse laser. The small pulse laser does 2 points of heat, 3 points of damage, has a short range of 1 hex, a medium range of 2 hexes, a long range of 3 hexes, a total of 1 tons in terms of weight, critical of 1, and obviously no ammo. The medium pulse laser does 4 points of heat, 6 points of damage, short ranges 1 to 2 hexes, medium ranges 3 to 4 hexes, long ranges 5 to 6 hexes, tonnage 2, critical 1, no ammo. The large pulse laser does 10 points of heat, so yikes, that spikes quite a bit there. 9 points of damage, short ranges of 1 to 3 hexes, medium range of 4 to 7 hexes, long ranges of 8 to 10 hexes, which is that's a little better for the trade-off, but the heat is still that's going to be an ouchie right there. That's going to be a real ouchie. A tonnage of 7, so you can see that it amps up a little bit more, so it's going to be one of those weapons where it's a hard sell, and a critical of 2. And that sort of is the pulse laser. Pulse laser is, again, you're going to want to play it like a brawly, sort of close-range weapon, and again, watch that heat management. Good use of, your firing. Don't alpha strike too much to rack up too much heat, and just be overall mindful of heat buildup. And distances. Also, we want to do your distances. And in-game and video game adaptations, keep an eye on your meters or miles. Or not done in that format, silly Kibs. But keep an eye on your distances, because you want to make sure that you don't fire it at targets that don't necessarily hit. I've seen people in video games where they'll just shoot it at whatever distance, and it'll just be like, dude, you're firing your pulse laser, and you know what's happening? Nothing. I do it occasionally too, because I accidentally misclick, because I'm bad at misclicking. Ask Bubbles or Tibbs. They have a tendency to get shot in the back in games. But the pulse laser, you don't want to waste ammo, or not waste ammo, sorry. That doesn't even make any sense. You don't want to fire it when it's not absolutely necessary, because that heat will add up, especially when you get to the medium, and especially when you get to the large pulse laser with that 10 points of heat. Ouchie. Ouch. Next up, we have the Streak SRM-2. SRM standing for Short Range Missile. This weapon, if you have a lock-on, can more than likely strike an enemy target. She's pretty accurate, however, a short to medium range weapon, honestly. I'd say this weapon is good on a brawler mech, as it allows you to do guaranteed damage, presuming you have a lock-on, of course. It also might work pretty well on mechs like the Jenner, mechs that are meant to run in, deal damage, and then pop behind cover again, sort of the zip in, zip out kind of mechs. Other than that, I wouldn't recommend this missile for anything that isn't, dealing with close quarters combat. Particularly useful in small, short-ranged engagements, canyons, and cities. Now, for the rule segment of the Streak RSM-2, game use. Before the Streak can fire, it must have a lock-on. To obtain a lock-on, the player must make a standard to hit roll. Just as when firing a normal SRM during his turn of the combat phase, if successful, the player may immediately fire his SRMs at the locked-on target. Both SRMs will automatically hit, and the player rolls in the usual way to determine hit locations. If the lock-on roll fails, the player does not need to fire the SRMs or build up any heat. The player must roll for a lock-on each turn, even if he achieved a lock-on the previous turn. The table for the Streak SRM-2 is as follows. Heat, 2 points. Minimum range is, short range is 1 to 3 hexes, medium range is 4 to 6 hexes, long range is 7 to 9 hexes, weighing in at 1.5 tons, with a critical of 1 and an ammo capacity of 50. Bit of a tip for the whole abbreviations of the LRMs, SRMs, MRMs, etc. Pro tip, anything with a RM abbreviation at the end normally means ranged missiles, SRMs or LRMs, etc. However, the MRM is a rocket-based weapon. It doesn't have a guidance and is a point and shoot. Now back on topic. Now for the Swarm LRMs. The Swarm LRM is a saturation-based weapon, the missile having submunitions which begin to splinter above the designated target to unleash devastation. Fantastic at suppressing enemies in the blast zone. If you see an enemy bunching up their units, this would be an excellent time to make use of the Swarm, as they have a high chance to damage any poor mech, tank, or footman to be caught in its rippling explosions, turning light units into nothing but charred flesh and metal fragments. Now for the game use. At the start of play, players should note whether or not their LRM ammunition is Swarm type. LRM ammunition can only be designated as a Swarm only in full ton slots, meaning you can't half that, it has to be a full ton. Swarm LRMs operate like normal LRMs, except that those missing their target will attack any units, friendly or enemy, that are adjacent or in the same hex as the original target. Any missile that misses may attack the closest unit adjacent to the original target, and then the next closest unit adjacent to the original target, and so on. A new modified to hit number is recalculated based on the new target's range, movement, and other determining factors. If there are 2 or more targets at the same distance from the original target, the defending player may choose the order of attacks. Use the closest column on the missile hit table, rounding down to resolve each attack. For example, an LRM-20 is equipped with swarms, fires at a target adjacent to 2 other units. The LRM-20 misses, and the defending player chooses an adjacent unit for the next attack. This attack has a new modified to hit number, and 15 LRMs hit the target. The remaining 5 LRMs are then used against the other adjacent target. They miss, and so are lost. Swarm LRMs are fired and used as normal LRMs, except they cost 3 times as much. So yeah, with the Swarm LRM, just be cautious of how close your units are placed, as they have a possibility to be struck with the Swarm LRMs as well, and that's one thing that you need to always bear in mind. In game use, other than that, the Swarm LRMs are pretty devastating. You want to target things that are lightly armored, or things in the back, or condensed enemy units. If you ever see a player bunch up their forces, that is a prime opportunity to strike. But be advised that there is a slight risk when firing when your units are engaged in melee or in close quarters combat, as it might actually hit your guys instead of theirs. Thunder LRMs. Now these are definitely something unique. These are mines, each round containing 5 anti-vehicular mines and 5 anti-personnel mines. For the game use, players should note at the start of the game whether their LRM ammunition is the Thunder type or not. LRM ammunition can be designated as Thunder type only in full ton lots, much like the Swarm LRMs. Thunder LRM attacks use all the normal LRM rules, except, like artillery, the attack is always launched against a hex rather than a unit. Thus, a Thunder LRM attack is only modified by the attacker's movement and terrain, never by the movement of a unit that happens to be in the target hex. Bear that in mind. If the attack misses, it scatters per normal artillery rules. Thunder LRM attacks that hit leave the target hex mined with a mine field, equal in strength to the number of missiles in the attack. Thus, an LRM-20 will lay a 20-point minefield, and an LRM-5 will lay a 5-point minefield. Units friendly or enemy in a hex hit by a thunder attack are not affected until they move out of the hex. At that point, the player must make a die roll to see if he steps on a mine. So, it's not guaranteed. All other units that enter the hex during their movement must also roll to see if they step on a mine. Use the rules found on page 45, Conventional Minefields, of the Battletech Manual. Now, the Battletech Manual should be containing these. I'm not sure if they moved them around in the newer version of it, but it will be in the Battletech manual, the minefield rules. To resolve the attack, remembering that the attack's value varies with the size of the LRM launcher. So the Thunder LRMs are going to be one of these very unique weapons that will be very fun, especially for roleplay campaigns. Can you imagine using them for enemies fleeing out of the battlefield or out of the combat operation? If they are fleeing, then you can use landmines to force them down certain ways. Like you could put mines on a hill so they can't crest over the hill to use that as cover, and thusly they have to go around, which allows you to shoot them in the back more. There's a lot of applications you could use it, and you can be quite creative with them too. For example, let's say you have some mortar vehicles or some infantry that are very exposed, and you have a fire starter approaching them. You can put down some mines to force the enemy to take the longer way around, or perhaps the enemy will have to go through it and they'll blow up and take some leg damage. So it's really more of it's a weird one, right? So it's going to be kind of RNG based, but at the same time, if you're lucky and you use this in the right application, the Thunder LRMs are going to make anybody sad. And enemy armored columns, anti-infantry, they can be applied to any enemy target. The only thing obviously they can't be applied to is, sadly, they don't float. So any naval operations or combined operations with naval vessels, not particularly useful, and sadly not useful against aerospace or helicopters. I know, go figure. It would be kind of funny if they were. They had like little balloons or something. But all in all, the Thunder LRMs, honestly, I find them to be the more unique weapon. I've never tried them myself. In fact, I've never tried most of these weapons if they are not in the video game adaptations. But they are one that it would be quite interesting to see how that would work. Especially because think about it, you could place those down and enemies could run into it and their leg could just blow the fuck up. Oh, excuse my language. But you know what I'm saying. Oh, what am I kidding? I try to censor myself, but it just doesn't go. It just doesn't work. It's in my nature. We'll do our best, but honestly, no promises. Either or. The Thunder LRMs are phenomenal at what they do. Just based on the overall stats here. If you can deploy these in the right situation, the ideas, the applications, they have quite the versatility on paper. Then again, that all changes in the actual flow. And sadly, we've never seen them in game use, but hopefully, with the new MechWarrior game, we'll see a change there. Now on to the next topic. Now for the electronic components. Now bear in mind, anything that isn't specifically stated that it is specific for mech use only means it can be used on any other war machine. This includes ground vehicles, boats, planes, helicopters, and even spacefaring vessels. So just bear that in mind. Anything that you never hear specifically listed, like pulse lasers or the AMS system, that means it can be applied to any various machine. Heck, even it can be built upon structures and fire, such as turrets and defensive structures and positions. So, unless specifically listed as it's only for one thing, in the case of like Myomer objects or Myomer related things, that means it can be applied to anything. So just bear that in mind, unless I specifically say it cannot be. First up, we have the Artemis for FCS. FCS standing for Fire Control System. Now, for missile boat-based mechs, what this does is improve the missile accuracy on a mech by aiding the guidance system within the warheads. You can use it on mechs that do not fall specifically under the missile boat archetype of mechs, but bear in mind that it's C-bills that could have been spent putting it on a mech in which it complements its missile loadout, rather than a large mech with a single LRM-5. And bear in mind, LRM trucks and SRM trucks could also use this as well. So if you don't have a mech that quite fits the bill, there's always the other option of adding it to a vehicle. The Artemis system allows the pilot to paint a target with an IR beam, which once the target is successfully painted, the pilot may then fire. The Artemis relays correction data to the missiles in flight, making hitting moving targets much more effective. Please bear in mind, warriors, you need a good gunnery skill to make this weapon effective, as the missiles will track the IR beam via your Artemis system. This means if you aim at a mech and it ducks behind an orphanage, and you're still aiming at that said target, which is now behind an orphanage, well, let's just say that the Ares Convention will have your ass court-martialed before sundown. Now for the game use. The Artemis 4 can be mounted with any long or short-range missile pack, with one Artemis system per missile pack required, All the mech's missile systems must have the Artemis or none can have it. The Artemis 4 is incompatible with the Shriek SRM-2 system. Bear that in mind. The NARC missile beacon and the Swarm and Thunder LRM missile. So this limits it quite a bit, so just factor that in when you're using it. Additionally, the Artemis 4 requires a special version of the standard SRM and LRM missiles for game purposes. These special missiles differ from normal missiles only in cost, which is doubled. Any missiles launched from an Artemis-equipped mech is treated exactly like a normal attack, except that if the attack hits, apply a +2 modifier when consulting the missile hit table. This has the effect of increasing the number of hits on the target. An Artemis 4 system weighs 1 ton and takes up 1 critical space. So all in all, as long as you've got the gunnery skill, you can actually make the Artemis system well worth its weight in C-bills. However, if you don't have a character or a unit that has the gunnery skills to quite use it effectively, then perhaps it's better off just not equipping it until you have a warrior who has gained enough skill that they can actually utilize it effectively. In video game adaptations, you will actually have to keep, the reticule over the enemy target. And if they duck behind something, well, tough titty, says the kitty. You're not getting any bites unless the missiles arc over enough. It really just depends on the lob effect. Certain targets and certain walls of cover, you can actually still strike a target, but just bear in mind it will be less effective if a target is in the way. As long as you're able to paint the mech, more than likely a missile or two are bound to strike their target, and let's just say, if you use it effectively, catching mechs out in the open, and you're good at tracking them, because that's making up for the gunnery skill, because it's real-life gunnery skill, you can actually make this thing deal quite a bit of damage, as you can make most of the missiles hit relatively accurate. The Artemis system is able to make those missiles go to where you point that IR beam. They track to it. So bear that in mind. If you're good enough, and you think you can pull it off, definitely worth its weight in C-bills. But if not, maybe it's better off trying one of the other Lostech missile types, just to supplement that fact. Now for the Beagle Active Probe. This is indisputably one of the most advanced sensors in the market, so much so that she can even detect powered down mechs, as well as cloaked enemy forces. Definitely pick this up for any of your recon forces. If you can secure this, it's an absolute must. Knowing is half the battle, as they say, and believe you me, knowing where the enemy is hiding, or if they're powered down and waiting in ambush, is going to save your butt a ton of fucking problems down the line. Oh my goodness gracious. You have to have it. It is a must. The Beagle Active Probe is your eye in the sky, so to speak. She will detect anything that can pop out and give you a nasty mess, so to speak. So, now for the game use. A mech equipped with a Beagle Active Probe automatically gives a Battle Force Lance an active electronic probe chit on the Battletech map. A mech so equipped will detect any hidden mech or vehicle, not infantry, however. Infantry are excluded from this, if it moves within 4 hexes of the unit's location, and would have a valid line of sight to the hex in which the unit is hiding. Now, the Beagle Active Probe stats are weighing in at 1.5 tons with 2 critical spaces for its slot. And that wraps up the Beagle Active Probe. But seriously, the Beagle Active Probe, if you want to guaranteedly find the enemy, and if you know they're going to use stealthy tactics or it's a very mountainous terrain, having that thing is going to save you a lot of headache. And so you should probably pick this up because, like said, knowledge is half the battle. And in Battletech, it is essential to know the position of your enemies at all times. So that way, you can easily outmaneuver and outpace them. This will also expose any softer targets, LRM trucks, artillery vehicles, missile boats, and things of that nature. It also will be able to detect incoming enemy raids or enemy forces if you can use it effectively. With that, bearing that in mind, that wraps up the Beagle Active Probe. But seriously, this thing is handy. If you're worried about somebody sneaking up on you, the Beagle Active Probe is going to give you an edge that you desperately need. Next up, Guardian ECM Suite, ECM standing for Electronic Countermeasures Device. Imagine the Beagle, except the exact opposite of that. The ECM is designed to throw off enemy long-range scanners and make enemy sensors work overtime to keep a lock on you. It reliably conceals your mech's chassis for over 180 meters, I'd say. However, you'll find that most pilots will switch to manual optics to confirm your chassis silhouette. The ECM is fantastic at making the enemy think and scratch their head for where you are and as what your mech is in specific. So this could mean that a lighter mech equipped with an ECM could be, considered a king crab, an assault class mech when it's actually instead a light, and so you can actually bait units away. Now, normally they will figure this out based on the movement of your mech, so bear that in mind if you want to emulate certain mechs or certain speeds to sort of, like I said, emulate a certain classification of a mech. That way you can lure them into a trap, so to speak. Now, for the game use, it's relatively simple. A Lance with a mech equipped with a Guardian ECM Suite automatically receives an ECM chit in the battle force. Guardian Suite, 1.5 tonnage, critical 2 spaces. The more specific rules we'll get to later when we go further into the game, but as it stands, that just kind of wraps it up there. So on to the next topic, which we're going to actually talk about, actually more electronics, surprisingly. Starting with the Myomer Accelerator Signal Circuitry. That one is a mouthful. That abbreviation is MASC. The MASC system. Think of this as the boost or sprint button for your mech. It essentially sends electrical signals faster than it otherwise would to the various Myomer nodes, making the mech exert itself and move in a significantly faster fashion, allowing for the mech to run faster than it normally would. Now, it doesn't actually quite make it do much more than that. You would think it would make it rotate or do some other things faster. Sadly, the way it works is the MASC, it doesn't make it fight better in melee or move fast, move faster, yes, but it doesn't help it torso twist or do anything of that nature any bit faster, which is honestly one thing I wanted to mention because I thought that was a slight oversight, but oh well. However, as I'm sure you've guessed by now, some mechs weren't quite designed to move that fast. By some, I mean all. This thing is boosting these poor mechus past their design speeds. Extended use will cause extreme tension and stress to build on the mech's actuators, otherwise known as the mech's joints. This tension can result in a catastrophic failure, which can damage the leg, even break it, or simply just cause the mech to fall over. So bear that in mind when applying it, and extensive use of the MASC can result in some serious issues, so be a little bit cautious with that. Now for its game use, any player with a MASC-equipped mech can announce that he is activating the system at the start of his movement phase. So you have to announce it before, not during, not after. Otherwise, you can't do it. The player rolls a 2d6 on a result of 3 or more. The system works and the mech is running at a speed twice its normal walking speed. On a result of 2, the leg actuators freeze up and the mech is immobile for the rest of the game. See the problem here? Ouch, that can really backfire, so be careful with it. If the player chooses to use the system the next turn, the activating roll is increased by 2 to 5 or greater. The third turn of consecutive use increases the activating roll by 4, the fourth turn by 8, and the fifth turn results in automatic failure of the legs. So use it sparingly and only when you really need to. It's a very risky gambit, I'll say that much to be sure. Players can reduce the activating number by not utilizing the system for each turn that the system is not used. The number is reduced to the next lower step. For example, if a player used a MASC for 3 consecutive turns, giving it an activating turn number of 7, 1 turn of non-use would reduce the activating number to 5, and 2 turns of non-use would reduce the target number back to the original 3. The activating number can never fall below 3, so you can sort of throttle it, almost like it's heat management. You can go up and down, and just bear that in mind that you don't overexert it, because the higher you exert it, the more stress it puts on the actuators, the more likely it is to mess something up majorly. Now for the MASC systems table. She weighs in mech tonnage of 20, round to the nearest whole number. Critical spaces mech tonnage is 20. So again, round to the nearest whole number. Other than that, that kind of wraps up the Myomer accelerator, or otherwise known as mask. Bear in mind, this thing's honestly, this is something I personally, I don't know. I find it too risky to use. It's one of those risk-reward factors. If you can utilize its speeds to greater advantage, let's say you're using a catapult and you need to use it to get a quick distance between, a light that just popped in, or you want to use it on a light to increase its speed even faster so it can zoom, zoom through the lines. I mean, at some of these speeds, you won't even have too much of a problem because, enemies are going to have a hard time tracking you, especially in the video game adaptations, because of all those evasion points as well as in the tabletop that you rack up. It makes hitting you extraordinarily hard, but it also makes shooting pretty hard, too. The mask is more of like a sort of run button. Run away or run to something quickly. Let's say you do have a catapult under attack and you want the light to, quickly run to it, sprint back to that light, or, catapult, or missile boat, and provide them aid. Most catapults aren't able, or other missile boats aren't quite able to quite properly defend themselves against a group of lights, or any various amount of tanks. The issue is being that those mechs are more designed as a long-range support. Though some catapults and some other missile boats are armed with, 4 medium lasers or other various weapons that they can sort of fend off things long enough for help to arrive. But don't overexert. And then for the mask system, it's an easy get out, but if you mess it up, you're not going anywhere. So just bear that in mind. Next up, we have something of a, well, I think everybody kind of knows what it is, more or less, the NARC missile beacon. The NARC itself is a sort of missile, more pod-like rather than a standard warhead. The tip of this pod digs into armor when it strikes a target. The tip magnetizing, holding it to the target, tank or mech, etc. At the rear of this pod is a beacon. This beacon acts as a homing beacon for missiles fired from allied mechs who are also equipped with NARCs. The thing is, when a NARC attaches to an enemy target, it's stuck there until a mech tech can remove it after battle. So pucker up, Buttercup, because you're about to have your day rained on day in and day out, with nothing but missiles and enemy fire to compensate you for your pain and misery. For the game use, players may fire 1 NARC pod per launcher, each turn as a normal SRM attack. If the attack is successful, the pod attaches to the target, mech, in any following combat phase. Any successful missile attacks by a NARC-equipped unit add a +2 to the roll against the missile hit table. This effect stays with the targeted mech for the length of the game. So yeah, that's not leaving you. You better get used to the fact that missiles will be raining on you frequently and to greater degrees of accuracy. The NARC system is incompatible with the Artemis 4 system, the Streak SRM-2 system, and the Swarm and Thunder LRM missile systems as well. Additionally, the cost of missiles for a NARC-equipped unit is doubled because its operation requires modified versions of the standard free-flight SRM or LRM variants. Its NARC missile table beacon it racks up surprising 0 heat, no damage, but it does latch on, so realistically, it leaves a little scratch, a little divot. The ranges are as follows. 1 to 3 hexes for short ranges, 4 to 6 hexes for medium ranges, 7 to 9 hexes for long ranges, weighing in about 3 tons. She's heavy, with critical space of 2 and ammo of 6. So you only get 6. Those are 6 NARC beacons, not NARC missiles. Bear that in mind. There's a huge difference there. But for the NARC beacon itself, it is extremely handy to have. And in the video game adaptations, it's kind of weird, right? Because in the video games, it can vary. Sometimes it requires, all mechs to have a similar system. Other times, you only need 1 mech to have the NARC beacon, and it just works that way. So some things are different between the tabletop and the video game adaptations. And the next thing that you need to know is that in the video game adaptations, firing it is less like a missile. It's more like It's less like a missile. It's more like, you're shooting a projectile. Almost like an autocannon, I'd say. Where it's a projectile that shoots thunk into the enemy target. That's kind of what it feels like versus the missile thing. That was maybe like a gameplay change because, if you fired it like a missile in the video games, it's a single object. the objects, generally speaking, have a high tendency to miss, and so gameplay-wise, it probably made more sense to make it a sort of almost direct-fire weapon for video games. Versus tabletop, it's a little bit simpler with how that works, I guess. That's why there's a slight differential there. Other than that, the NARC beacon is pretty handy, and I seriously recommend you check this thing out. It will help you with particularly fast targets, because that bonus to the hit table. So lighter mechs, those evasion points will be reduced slightly because that NARC beacon helps reduce that as a whole. It just makes shooting it a lot easier and dealing some damage to it. Other than that, that wraps up the NARC beacon. Now we're on to construction materials. These are going to be, well, more physical constraints within the mechs rather than electronic or weapon-based items. So we're going to be starting with the case, otherwise known as cellular ammunition storage equipment. A mouthful to be sure, but I honestly prefer the case abbreviation, don't you? It's designed with the intention of keeping the mech operational from internal explosions. External. Yes, it's basically just an extra piece of armor. We're not to the fibroferous yet, at least externally speaking. So let's carry on with this. Internal-wise, from missile, cannon detonations, various cannon shells, the AC shells, those have explosive propellant and sometimes explosive tipped. Missile warheads can also detonate within your mech as well, which can do extensive damage and even take out your fusion core, or otherwise known as power plant. How it achieves this is through using multiple layers of ferrofibrous armor plates, encasing the ammunition internally, all save for the rear loading compartments. That way, when the bombs detonate inside, all that force from that blast is sent out the back, which quite literally blows the back armor plates clean off. So bear that in mind, that yes, you may have avoided some damage, but it is still going to mess up your mech a little bit. It'll keep your power plant safe. But now you have no back armor, so that's something you got to be aware of. Now, there's a couple things that you can do with this knowledge. Depending on what you're playing, if you're playing a role-playing game, you can still flee the battle because your mech isn't knocked out. Like, if you lose too many equipment, you can get out of there, evac. Another thing you can do is you can continue fighting, Die with honor, battle, brother. Usual suicidal stuff that filthy clan pigs like, I'm kidding. Don't hurt me. All right, so moving on to the next, next item. Or no, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. What happens when you do these long videos is your brain starts to fizzle out towards the end. So for the game use, the K system can be built into either torso side of a mech. It does take up one critical space in the section where it is mounted and weighs half a ton. Treat hits to the critical space where the case system is located as no result, and make a new die roll. Any onboard ammunition that explodes in that section will do normal damage to the internal structure of that section. Excess damage is then applied to the back armor. That's blowing it off slowly, piece by piece. It doesn't mean it blows off quite, though. Any other remaining damage is not applied. Remember that if all the internal structure on either side of the torso is destroyed, the corresponding arm will not work, because it's basically assuming that, the circuitry or the various power connections to that myomer arm and then all those equipment have been destroyed in the explosive blast. Case systems can only be mounted on mechs or vehicles. In vehicles, the systems can only be mounted in the body location. Any ammunition explosion results in the destruction of the back armor and puts the vehicle out of action. However, any crew members or passengers in the vehicle will survive the explosion. Case system tables are as follows. 0.5 tonnage, not weighing in too much, with a critical space of 1. Now, the case system, honestly, while it's, relatively lightweight, it's honestly worth its weight in gold, because you'll actually end up saving a lot more components. And in your role plays or in video game adaptations, you will lose a lot less components and a lot less items and have to pay a lot less C-bills. All in all, it's an extra case of insurance that you should just get. Unless you're just playing an arcade game or a skirmish sort of thing, then don't sweat it too much, but even then, there's an off chance that it'll keep your mech in the game a little bit longer versus not having it and saying the ammo detonates and now your power plant's taken out. And once that's gone, your mech's it's gone. You're out. So honestly, for the .5 tonnage, if you have any explosive-based ammunition, not including Gauss rounds or lasers, obviously, like missile racks or rockets or AC rounds, it doesn't hurt to put them in the case racks. Honestly, I do them a lot myself. The case system it's kind of a must. In my opinion, it's a must get, but that's just personal preference. Some people like the risk. I myself like to make sure that when inevitably my massive AC racks and my King Crab go off, which they always do because I take so much fire, that the explosions don't, turn me into paste. That's the overall goal here, guys. I just don't want to be liquid jello. I know some of you are a little bit more fluid, because you're splattered all over your cockpit, unlike me, who am perfectly fine until an AC round or Gauss round goes straight into my face. Then I too am paste as well. What can I say? Next up, we have something that you little filthy clanner boys have been screeching since this video started. Home now. It is, yes, I know, the double heat sinks. Now, these things are kind of self-explanatory. How do the double heat sinks work? Well, they are double a normal heat sink. They displace heat faster than your average thing. And so double heat sinks they're just better. If you can take a double heat sink, always take a double heat sink over a regular heat sink. Now, here's the thing about their table. They weigh in at 1 ton, so they're heavy, a little heavy, but they do build up, right? And they take up 3 critical spaces, so they can rack up rather quickly. But honestly, getting those double heat sinks is very important. Now, for the game rules for the tabletop, let's get started with that. Mechs with double heat sinks dissipate 2 points of heat for each operating heat sink. Each turn, if submerged in water, the heat sink will dissipate 4. So if you see water, jump in it and cool off. Trust me. Anytime you see water in Battletech, even if you don't have double heat sinks, just dive right in. If it's lava, that's not water. Don't dive in that. That is a mistake. Do not do that. Some people, get the liquidy bits mixed up. One's glowing molten hot. That's going to turn your legs into goo, and then you're just going to explode, and your pilot's going to slowly sink into the lava. Sort of like Terminator, Except he's screaming in his cockpit as he's burning alive. But, it's a little bit more depressing and painful. Back to the rules before I digress too much here. You'll dissipate 4 points of heat in water. A mech cannot be equipped with both single and double heat sinks. So you gotta pick one or the other. No mix and match, boys. One or the other. Vehicles cannot be equipped with double heat sinks. That is silly. Honestly, one thing I don't really get is why they don't, but most vehicles actually don't even build up that much heat to begin with to become too much of a problem. One thing that I wish Battletech would elaborate on is the vehicles. Honestly, vehicles, aerospace, and space, they're the 3 sections that, and infantry, honestly, any of the support areas, they lack refined rules for some of them, specifically for aerospace. But that's just a thing that I just wanted to get out there. Just inform people. So next up, we have the endosteel internal structure. Now, how that works, it's mechs that use endosteel need to allocate only half of the normal weight to their internal structure, keeping all fractions. However, the bulk of this alloy reduces the number of free critical spaces by 14, so you're going to lose a little bit of space here, so be careful with that. The player can allocate this amount as he sees fit, even filling up one section totally as the as long as a total of 14 critical hit locations are filled by the endosteel. So the endosteel will have to take up those 14 slots. Anyone who played Roadtech, kind of understands that recently or in the recent Mech Warrior games, stuff like that. A hit to a critical space taken up by endosteel structure is treated as no result and should be re-rolled. So if they hit you in the endosteel bits, you're like, oh no, re-roll that. Re-roll that until you're crying about pain and misery. Like, no, my Gauss rifle, it's gone. Oh, sadness. What can you do? What can you do? Well, not much, because they just blew that out. Makes me sad. Makes me sad is what it does. All right, the next armor we have is ferrofibrous. Ferrofibrous is an improved version of the normal mech armor, so it's just a little bit better than your average armor. For its game rules, mechs that use ferrofibrous armor increase their armor factor. Calculate the armor factor as normal, then multiply by 1.12. If I didn't hate math already, Battletech sure likes to drag me through the mud on this. Dropping all fractions, this is the mech's total armor factor. The bulk of the armor reduces the number of free critical spaces by 14. The player can allocate this amount as he sees fit, even filling up one section totally if desired. A total of 14 critical hit locations, like the endosteel, must be filled by the ferrofibrous, meaning they're, like I said before, have to make sure those 14 critical spaces are first fitted with that. Honestly, here's how I do it. Normally, I fit this stuff beforehand. That way, you already subtract those 14 critical spaces, and then you add the weapons after. Normally, add the biggest stuff and then add the littler stuff. Just sort of work your way down, so to speak. It's just an easier method in my suggestions. Build-in ferrofibrous. Hits to a critical space taken up by ferrofibrous armor are treated as no result. Again, re-roll that puppy. Watch the other bits blow up. Get sad. Get depressed. Welcome to sadness. Ferrofibrous may also be used in vehicles and aerospace fighters. Awesome. In such cases, it reduces by 2 maximum number of weapons and ammo that can be mounted on each side. Now, for this thing is going to get those filthy clanners all excited, and I don't like it when they're excited. Not a good thing, but what can you do? What can you actually do? Actually, you can't do nothing. Fine. The XL engine, we're there. Okay, calm down. The XL engine is super advanced. This is the Big Daddy fusion core. Heavy lifter. Oh boy. And it's got better shielding technology too, so try blowing up my fusion core now. If it blows up, you're going to be sad. It's okay. It'll be over quickly. Oh, sadness. Oh, superheated air. Looks like a nuclear explosion. It does look like a nuclear explosion. Anyways. Game use. Players may designate any fusion plant as being equipped with XL technology. The result is that the normal engine weight is half. Retain fractions. I hate fractions. Why do you do this to me, Battletech? Why? Published amount. The player must allocate 3 critical spaces for the engine to both the left and the right torso. The critical hit table of the mech, any hit to these new locations is treated as a normal engine hit. XL technology is not available for aerospace fighters or vehicles, only glorious battle mechs, or anything that wasn't listed there. So technically speaking, infantry. How do you feel about that? FASA? What's that? I can't hear you. You're a dead company. Oh, I just hurt my own feelings. All right. Now that we've gotten that sadness out of the way, we're going to move on to the cost table. For you role players out there who want to play a Battletech role play and you want to buy some of this super rare tech. Also, you'll need to roll on fucking... Oop. You know what? I give up. Give up! I tried. You'll need to roll on tables to find out, what's the rarity and scarcity of these items. But, as it stands, this is just the cost. So, for the cost of the anti-missile system is 100,000 C-bills. Reloads for 2,000 tons, so that's a lot of tons. It's going to stack up. Aero 4 missile system, 450,000 C-bills. 10,000 ton standard, 15,000 ton for homing. Artemis 4 FCS, 100,000, 2 times the normal missile cost, so double the missile cost there. The Beagle active probe is 200,000 C-bills. The K system is 50,000 C-bills. See? Pretty cheap. Worth its weight in gold. Trust me. Well, C-bills. You get the point. Double heat sinks. Each include 10 that come with the engine. 6,000 C-bills. Endosteel 2. 4 times normal skeleton cost. ER large laser. 200,000 C-bills. ER PPC laser. Or PPC laser. You dummy. It's a particle projector cannon. It can't be a laser too. I'd like to see them try, though. 300,000 C-bills. Ferrofibrous armor, times tons of armor, 20,000 C-bills. Gauss rifle, 300,000 C-bills. 20,000 per ton. Oh, that's so expensive. It racks up. But those Gauss rounds are just glorious slugs, let me tell you. The Guardian ECM Suite, 200,000 C-bills. The KW1 Ultra AC5, 200,000 C-bells, 9,000 tons per shot. Or per ton. Beg pardon, but sometimes that equates to shot. Depends on the weapon. The LB-10X is 400,000 C-bells. He's expensive, what can I say? 12,000 tons to 20,000 tons for cluster. So that's, that's a lot of C-bills. Gosh, my Comstar. Oh, it's my inner space priest. Space magic. Oh, you're gonna need some space magic to make some of the money for this stuff. All right, mask system, 1,000 C-bills times the engine rating times the tonnage. Don't worry, that'll rack up real nice, real quick. Oh boy. NARC missile beacon, 100,000, 6,000 per ton. Oh, the formatting for this is awful. Who did that? Pulsar large. Pulse laser large, 175,000. Pulse laser medium, 60,000. And pulse laser small, 16,000. The Shrika SRM2, costing it at 15,000, 54,000 per ton. Ooh, spendy. My boy, stop that. Oh, TAG is 50,000. Thunder LRMs is 2 times the normal missile cost. And the XL engine is 4 times the normal engine cost. It's like in the millions bracket, just in case you were wondering. Oh my goodness. This technology, and it also, when you're doing a roleplay, one thing I want to tell you guys, bear in mind what era you are. So if you're playing in like the third succession war, say 3015, or fourth succession war, technology hits its lowest at the third succession war. Oh my god, I almost raised my hand into the fan. That would have been painful. And so things should be more expensive for you GMs out there. Increase the cost, increase the rarity, make it harder to get. Second succession war, pretty rare. First succession war, it's rare, but it's there. Obviously, Star League era, if you're doing a Star League campaign, oppressing revolts or fighting in the American Civil War, pretty common, honestly. Any clan campaigns for Operation Klondike, when they're going on their exodus, this stuff should be common. They should have plenty of it. Except for when, the clans fall apart, then it starts to, they regress a little bit, but honestly, then clan invasion stuff comes back, most of it, stuff like that. And, post-fourth succession, post-clan invasion, this stuff should be re-entering the market. This shouldn't be too rare, but expensive. That's the one thing to bear in mind in Battletech as the ages go on. It's like, how do you want to balance it? If you're doing a generational campaign, balance it to be generational. But, case-by-case basis, general broad strokes are, I wouldn't recommend it. I'd go case by case. Other than that, that wraps up today's Lostech lore video. Holy schmolies, that was a biggin'. There won't be many more like this, because I have to work on a lot of other things. The next thing we have coming up is going to be the Battletech mechs. So we're going to go through this series. We're going to go through the 750 technical readout period, and we're going to go through all the mechs, and then we will wrap it up and move on to the next technical readout. That's how these TROs will be done. Until next time, you guys have yourself a fantastic day. This is your host, Captain Kibs, signing off. And until then, have a great day.